My boss fired me out of nowhere just to hand my job to his incompetent nephew. But what he didn't realize was that I was holding the one thing that could destroy his little scheme. I know that sounds dramatic, but that's exactly how it went down. One day, I was sitting in my office, buried in emails and preparing for a meeting with one of our biggest clients, when my boss called me in. I thought maybe he wanted an update, or had some feedback. Instead, he blindsided me. He leaned back in his leather chair with this smug grin, and said, "We've decided to go in a new direction. You're no longer needed here." I was stunned. I had been at this company for years. I was the one pulling late nights, fixing messes, and making sure clients didn't walk away when others dropped the ball. And now, suddenly, I was no longer needed. But the kicker. Sitting in the corner of the room was his nephew, a guy I had seen maybe twice in the office. He was lazy, always on his phone, and somehow convinced he was God's gift to business. And right then and there, I realized, my boss wasn't firing me because of performance. He was handing my accounts, my hard work, and my reputation to his nephew like it was some kind of birthday present. That was the moment everything changed for me. To understand why this all hit me so hard, you need to know what life at that company was like before everything blew up. I wasn't some hotshot executive or anything, just a mid-level employee. But I was the guy people could actually rely on. If a client had a problem, they called me. If a project was falling apart, I stayed late to fix it. I built my reputation on showing up, getting things done, and keeping people's trust. And honestly, my clients respected me for it. Some of them even told me I was the reason they stuck with our company. But my boss, he never saw it that way. To him, I was just replaceable. He was one of those arrogant types who thought being in charge meant he was always the smartest guy in the room, even when he clearly wasn't. And above everything else, he valued family loyalty. Not performance. Not results. Just family. That's where his nephew came in. This kid, I'll call him Brad, was everything I couldn't stand in a coworker. He showed up late, left early, and when he was actually in the office, he was glued to his phone. He had no clue what he was doing, but he strutted around like he owned the place just because his uncle was the boss. He'd make these smug little comments about how he was next in line to take over big accounts, and we all just rolled our eyes. The sad part was, he wasn't entirely wrong. Everyone knew my boss had a soft spot for him. No matter how many mistakes Brad made, there were never any real consequences. He was untouchable. So there I was, respected by clients and co-workers, but constantly overlooked by the one person who had the power to recognize me. And deep down, I think I knew that sooner or later, that favoritism was going to blow back on me. And then, it did. The day it all came crashing down started like any other. I was at my desk, prepping notes for a client meeting, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from my boss, "Come to my office now." I walked in, and immediately, I knew something was off. He was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, wearing that smug little half-smile he always had when he thought he was being clever. And sitting off to the side, like some kind of royal heir waiting for his crown, was his nephew, Brad. Before I could even sit down, my boss hit me with it. "We've decided to go in a new direction. We need fresh blood on these accounts. You're no longer needed here." Just like that. No warning. No thank you for the years of work I'd put in. Nothing. I sat there, stunned. I managed to get out a shaky, "Wait, what?" He didn't flinch. "Brad will be taking over your clients from now on. It's time to let the next generation step up." And then, I swear I'll never forget this, Brad smirked. Not a nervous smile, not a polite nod. A full-on, smug grin, like he'd been waiting for this moment, watching me lose everything I'd worked for. That was the moment it clicked for me. This wasn't business. This wasn't about fresh blood or new ideas. This was pure nepotism. I wasn't being replaced because I failed. I was being thrown away so his useless nephew could play at being important. And as I sat there, staring at Brad's smug face, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't just angry. I was done being the quiet, dependable guy who took it on the chin. If they thought they could toss me aside like garbage, they had no idea who they were messing with. That was the exact moment I realized it was war. Getting fired was bad enough. But what came after? That was a whole new level of betrayal. Within days, I started hearing whispers. A former co-worker called me, sounding almost embarrassed. "Hey, just so you know, the boss is telling everyone you were unreliable. Said you were missing deadlines and letting clients down." I felt sick. That was the exact opposite of who I was. I was the guy people counted on. And now, my reputation, the thing I'd built brick by brick for years, was being trashed, just so his nephew could look like some kind of savior. And Brad? He wasted no time sliding into my old role. He sent out these cocky emails to my clients, bragging about how he was taking things to the next level. But within weeks, it all started to unravel. One client called me personally, not through work, but to my own phone. They were furious. Apparently, Brad had shown up late to a meeting, didn't know any of the project details, and actually told them, "Relax, I'll figure it out later." Another client messaged me on LinkedIn. "We miss working with you. This new guy doesn't even answer emails." And the worst part? He actually insulted one of our longest-term partners, the kind of client who had been with us for over a decade. Brad had the nerve to suggest they were too old-fashioned and needed to modernize if they wanted to keep up. Meanwhile, my co-workers were watching this disaster unfold in real time. A few of them started secretly texting me. "Brad just messed up another report. Total train wreck. He doesn't even know how to log into the system, dude. It's pathetic. Everyone knows you were the glue holding this place together." I should have felt vindicated, but honestly, I was boiling. My name was still being dragged through the mud, and the company was letting it happen just to protect the boss's nephew. That was the moment I realized they weren't just trying to replace me. They were trying to erase me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. Then came the call that changed everything. I was at home, scrolling job boards and wondering how I'd even start over, when my phone lit up with a familiar number. It was our biggest client, the one account that practically kept the company afloat. I answered, and the voice on the other end was sharp, almost shaking with frustration. "What the hell is going on over there? We can't get a straight answer from this kid. He doesn't know the first thing about our projects." I tried to stay professional, even though I technically didn't work there anymore. I said, "I'm sorry to hear that. I'm not with the company now." But the client cut me off. "Yeah, I know they pushed you out. Big mistake. If you were still around, we'd never put up with this nonsense." That line hit me like a thunderclap. If you were still around, we'd never put up with this nonsense. It wasn't just a complaint. It was a hint. An opening. Later that week, I heard through one of my old co-workers that the boss had been confronted about Brad's incompetence. And instead of admitting the obvious, he doubled down. He told the client, "Brad is the future of this company. You'll just have to adjust." Adjust. The biggest client we had, the one paying more than all the others combined, was basically begging for competence, and my boss was telling them to adjust. That's when it clicked for me. They could smear my name. They could take my accounts. They could hand my job to a smug, useless brat. But the one thing they couldn't fake was trust. And I had something Brad would never have, that client's trust. For the first time since getting fired, I stopped feeling powerless. I realized I still had leverage. That client's words kept echoing in my head for days. If you were still around, we'd never put up with this nonsense. At first, I brushed it off. I was unemployed, angry, and still licking my wounds. But the more I thought about it, the more it started to feel less like a complaint, and more like an invitation. So I pulled out my old contract. I'd read it before when I was first hired, but now I was looking for something very specific. And sure enough, buried in the legal jargon, I found it. A clause that said nothing at all, prevented me from independently working with clients after leaving the company. In other words, there was no non-compete. No restrictions. Nothing stopping me from picking up the phone and offering my services directly. And here's the kicker, 4 years. I had been the one handling the Golden Goose clients' most sensitive projects. I knew their processes inside and out. I knew what they hated, what they needed, what they expected. I had built trust with them, the kind of trust you can't just pass along to someone else, no matter how much nepotism is involved. The more I thought about it, the clearer the path became. If Brad wanted to play businessman, let him. I wasn't going to fight him for scraps at my old job. I was going to go directly to the one client that mattered most, the one my boss couldn't afford to lose. I drafted a proposal, nothing flashy, just simple, professional, and clear. I highlighted my track record, the stability I could provide, and most importantly, the loyalty I had always shown them. The plan was simple: quietly reach out, pitch myself as an independent consultant, and give them what my old company no longer could, competence. And for the first time since I was fired, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. The day of the meeting, I walked in with nothing but a slim folder under my arm and a pounding heartbeat in my chest. The client's senior team was already waiting. They looked frustrated, tired, like people who had been pushed past their limit. I sat down, took a breath, and laid it out. I didn't badmouth my old company, and I didn't waste time talking about Brad. Instead, I opened the folder and slid over proof, years of successful project reports, client satisfaction records, and growth metrics that all had one thing in common: my name at the bottom. Then I said, "You don't need to keep suffering because of someone else's ego. I know your systems, I know your deadlines, and I know your expectations. I can step back in, as your independent consultant, and make sure this chaos ends today." For a moment, the room was silent. Then the client's director leaned back, smirked, and said, "Where do we sign?" Just like that, it was done. The biggest account my old company had, their Golden Goose, was now mine. The following week, I officially registered my own consulting firm. It wasn't flashy, just a small setup, nothing compared to the massive corporate machine I'd left behind. But it didn't matter, because overnight, I had something more valuable than any title or corner office. I had their flagship client. And that one move would set off a chain reaction my old boss never saw coming. It didn't take long for word to spread. The moment the contracts were signed, the company's revenue took a nosedive. And of course, my old boss found out exactly why. I wasn't in the room when it happened, but the client called me afterward just to share the story, and trust me, I savored every detail. My boss had stormed into their office, red-faced and practically shouting before he even sat down. He slammed his hand on the table and demanded, "What's going on here? Why are you pulling your account? Brad is the future of this company." The client didn't even flinch. They looked him dead in the eye and said, calm as could be, "We're not paying for nepotism. We prefer results. We've already signed with me." That one line broke him. Apparently, his face went pale first, then red again, like he couldn't decide between shock and fury. He stammered something about loyalty, about family legacy, but nobody was listening. Then Brad, clueless as ever, tried to jump in. "You'll regret this. I can handle these accounts better than anyone." The client actually laughed. "You couldn't even handle one meeting. Don't embarrass yourself." And just like that, they dismissed him. Both of them. The boss left the office humiliated, his nephew trailing behind like a scolded child. And me. I sat at home, sipping coffee, imagining the look on their faces when they realized the golden goose they thought they owned had just flown the coop, straight into my hands. From the outside, I didn't even have to lift a finger. Once the golden goose was gone, the damage took care of itself. I started hearing things, whispers from old co-workers, a few late-night texts from friends still inside the company. The board is livid. Losing that client cost them millions. Your boss is getting grilled in meetings every single day. Brad's a complete joke. He's hiding in his office because no one takes him seriously anymore. I'd sit back with my laptop open, working on the new projects the client had already given me, and just smile. For years, I'd been the dependable guy who never got credit. I was the one keeping things together while my boss played favorites, and his nephew strutted around pretending to be important. And now, the truth was laid bare for everyone to see. The board wasn't asking if my boss had made a mistake. They were asking how much longer he could survive it. His golden boy nephew wasn't the future of the company anymore. He was a walking reminder of the disaster they were trying to crawl out of. And me. I didn't need revenge speeches or dramatic confrontations. Watching them scramble to contain the financial disaster they created for themselves was more satisfying than anything I could have planned. The irony was almost poetic. My boss fired me to protect the future of his family. Instead, he might have just destroyed his own career. And I was only just getting started. Life after all that. Honestly, better than I ever imagined. The client who took a chance on me didn't just stick around, they doubled down. They started funneling more projects my way, the kind that used to keep whole teams at my old company busy. And the best part? They began introducing me to their partners, their networks, their colleagues. One recommendation led to another, and soon I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. For the first time, I had real freedom. No boss breathing down my neck. No office politics. No watching some clueless nephew get promoted over me. Just me, my work, and clients who respected what I actually brought to the table. Meanwhile, the stories kept trickling in. My old boss trying to spin excuses to the board. The nephew still fumbling meetings, burning bridges left and right. The company bleeding accounts faster than they could replace them. It was like watching a slow-motion collapse from the outside. And I didn't have to lift a finger. Karma handled it all. Looking back, I realized something important. Being underestimated was my greatest advantage. My boss thought firing me was the end of my story, but it was really just the beginning of a much better one. I didn't just outsmart them. I won the one thing they could never control, respect. And that's worth more than any promotion they could have given me.